Hello, welcome to Philosophy Roulette 142, where we get random papers off the internet and read and review them live for the audience out in the internets. What should we do today? I looked at the new articles. Let's go to, like, say, the journal list and see if we can get lucky with some of the, old favorites. Check out, see. I'm just feeling kind of tired. I don't want to search for papers and papers and papers. Let's just see if we can cheat, get lucky. See if there's something new from analysis that I can get a hold of at least. And we'll find out. Ooh, multiple realization book. That sounds like fun. Grounding grounds necessity. Did I read this? I wonder. Julio Dorizo. Well, can't get a hold of it. Can't do nothing about that. Yeah, I've read most of these actually at this point. So. Shucks. Read that one, read this one. Let's see, what else do we have? Plural logic. Social. Yeah, okay. Can't do anything with analysis today. Let's see what else we have on the hot list, I guess. Or the popular list is the popular kids hanging out over here. So let's see what we got. General philosophical logic, can't read that. J. Phil, everything's too long. We can take a look. We did some politics this morning. Let's not do some politics anymore. I mean, everything here is... I gotta figure out how to get rid of that dog bark. It's kind of hilarious, but it's a little silly. Let's see. History, philosophy. I don't want to do a history paper. Mind and language can be good, but it's a little technical sometimes. You get into like nitty-gritty of semantics, and I'm just like, I can't sit around reading formulas in semantics any more than I can read formulas in logic or math or anything else, or science. It doesn't really let's see, what do we got? Okay, so we don't have anything under super short, but we got like a 12. Conjoining meanings without losing our heads. Try clicking on that one. Understanding self-description. Let's see. Water is and is not H2O. Well, that's cool. Twin Earth scenarios. Let's see if this one's available. Nope, not there. Not there. Wither extinctions. Conjoining meanings. Oh, did I click on that one already? I don't know. Predictive processing. That sounds very technical. It's not going to help me. It can't be read if I'm reading out formulas or scientific things. Nope. Nope. Let's see if this is readable. 37 pages. I'm not reading 37 pages now. I'll be here for 3 hours. Can't do it. Okay, I tried. Did I try to get a hold of this? Mostly the gate crash paradox. Did I not read it, or did I read it? I don't know. Or was it too long? It looks like I might have tried. $14 pages of... Oh, this is why. Yeah, I went down and I was like, this is a lot of math to rereading. But let's keep it open for now, and maybe we'll come back to it. Self-locating belief and updating on learning. I think I did this one, but that's all right. Let's see what else we have. Shape a New World. It's a review. Reviews. Okay, so this is what happened. So all these other stuff, and it's all reviews. A paradox of evidential evidence. think did I read this one too? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read that one too. Review. I have no reason to. I think I read that one too. Okay, see, I'm scraping the bottom here. I've read all the things that are short, and otherwise I'll be sitting here for hours and hours reading a paper. It's kind of difficult. All right, so still thinking about this one because this is here, but nothing else from mind. See if we can get something a little bit different. Philosophia, I've read stuff from them recently. Philosopher's Imprint, have I read anything from them recently? They are one of these online things, and they tend to be long. Can't seem to. Yep. Dog bark. And there's no page numbers on this. Stoic Virtue, a contemporary interpretation. Let's take a look. Why not? I'm generally anti-Stoic at the moment, so I'm trying to see what the Stoics have to say. I'm just like, nope, I don't think I'm Stoic at all. Yeah, 28 pages and single-spaced. See, that's amazing. Just can't handle it. I'm sorry, I can't handle it. So I don't think that long. I can think for like 5 seconds, and that's about all I get. Let's try some ratio. Well, these things get technical too in ratio. I tried to read stuff in Oxford Studies and like metaphysics, but it was all this older stuff. PPR. I have not looked at PPR in a while. Let's see. Reasons relation to bodily action. That sounds kind of interesting. Did I read it already? Maybe. Well, it's here, and it's like looks like it's only like 10 pages. Oh, 14 pages. Okay, maybe. So, hold on to that one for a sec. Let's see what the PPR has. Do they have anything that's of not much length? Attitudinal and phenomenal theories of pleasure. You know, those essays have been fun when I read them. The ones on we just did one on hedonism the other day, so just to see if that's available. Although that's at least 14 pages, which does not make me happy. This one, ooh, short paper. Casey O'Callaghan. Did I read something from Casey O'Callaghan? I can't. It's all getting mixed up in my head now. I have no idea. I did start reading a paper the other day that I had already read. And then I get partway into it. I was like, oh wait, I did this one. I had to start over. I didn't post that one online though, so. Oh, hey, got some viewers. Let me know if there's anything you want me to read or you think are interesting, or send it to me. It's always fun. I'm just always trying to find something that's not too long to at least try to give some feedback on. Otherwise, it just drags on and on and on, and that's no fun. This is a review. Oh, these are reviews. Okay. Okay, so Metaphysics for Minorities? Is that a review? Alright, I don't think I've done a PPR one, so I'm going to go for this one here. This is the ratio. This one, oh no, where did it go? This was, the ratio. What about the philosophy and phenomenal? I thought I had it. Where'd it go? This is mind. It looked a little tough to read. This is the ratio. And what was the one from here? Did I not actually get one? Oh, okay. I wanted to do this attitudinal theories of pleasure, but it was unavailable. I'm sorry. I should go like break in and get some institutional access. But I don't have institutional access. But I should break in and get some. Someone wants to just donate their credentials to me, I'll take them. Alright, so diversity of experience. Oh, and this one too. I wanted to do this one. That's right. If it's not there, because I haven't read anything in PPR in a while, I was like, well, let's give PPR a chance. And this is also not accessible. Okay, so. Nope, 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 nope. Yay! This one. Okay, so. If you're in chat and you want to grab the link, here it is. Also, if you come later, you can always type !paper in the chat box, and the link will pop back up. Okie dokies. Causalism and Aristotelianism. Of course, this is a Reasoning's Relation to Bodily Action by David Jenkins. Part 1. Causalism and Aristotelianism. Reasoning is a distinctive kind of aim. Oh yeah, and if anyone's out there, feel free to ask me questions, whatever. I'll try to explain it as best I can. This is my first time reading this stuff too. Reasoning is a distinctive kind of aim-directed process with constituent events. In particular, reasoning is a kind of aim-directed thinking. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it is a kind of aim-directed thinking, but what is an aim-directed thinking then if it's not reasoning? It's like, is that actually explaining anything? I don't know. So, one great thing I got from when I was an undergrad, one of the professors says, look, you have to get the philosophers early. If you give them time to get warmed up, you're never going to stop them. So always remember to try to get them early. Suppose that one is reasoning about whether P, for instance, to do so is to engage in thinking in order to figure out, determine whether P. If one works out, figures out, determines whether P by engaging in such reasoning, then one has achieved one's aim, otherwise not. Such reasoning will have constituent events such as judgments, inferences, and acts of supposition. One might reason about whether P by first supposing that P, then by inferring Q, for instance, such that the latter events qualify as constituents of the aim-directed process, which is one's reasoning. Okay. I mean, this is an interesting sort of start here. I'm not even sure I mean, of course, I'm a completely poisoned example of anybody at this point. I have all my intuitions are a shot compared to other people, but like I have no idea. Like even though I in some intellectual sense, I know this paragraph made perfect sense. I actually don't believe it, like at all. Just that's me. I'm just like, no, like that's too easy. It's either begging the question or whatever else. This is nothing on the author or their writing. It's written fine, and like I said, intellectually I know that, but it's just like this sort of thing. I'm just already like, oh my god, I don't know what's going on. How do I know what reasoning is? This is just what they say it is. I'm sorry. Everyone should agree that our bodily actions can affect the course of our reasoning. Well, as Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It is a familiar fact that taking a stroll can affect what occurs to you as you work through a problem, for example. Everyone should likewise agree that there is a sense in which reasoning can issue in bodily actions. What does that mean, issue? Reasoning about what to do might bring to light what the best course of action is, for instance, and lead one's acting accordingly. But can the relation between reasoning and bodily action be more intimate than it is revealed to be by such platitudes? Yeah, this is kind of the worry, the platitude worry. You're just saying stuff, but what does it mean, like really? In particular, is the relation between reasoning and bodily action merely causal, or can reasoning constitutively involve bodily action? So, like, do I need to go like this with my hand to actually think? So is that, like, constitutive of it? Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, like, performative actions you can do with your hand to kind of say something, and maybe that's part of your thinking. Alright, so let's see where the author goes. Recent philosophical work on the relation between reasoning and bodily action is dominated by two views on the above matter. On the orthodox view, which I will label causalism, reasoning is at most causally related to bodily action. On this view, any given bodily action can at most be caused by or have a causal impact upon reasoning of one's. Bodily actions thus cannot feature as constituents of reasoning, and the sense in which reasoning can issue in bodily action must be understood causally. This view is often taken to be a consequence of the fact that we can reason and even complete reasoning without performing bodily actions. I mean, maybe gross bodily actions, but I mean, is thinking that doesn't count? That's like a special one that doesn't have any brain action. Thinking doesn't require brain action. So I mean, wouldn't people who say there's like a physical basis to thinking, wouldn't they count that sort of as a bodily action too? I don't know. Broom, for instance, notes that one might conclude practical reasoning about whether to phi, forming an intention to phi, without in fact phi-ing, perhaps the time to act has not yet come, or due to unexpected paralysis. Broom concludes that a bodily action of phi-ing could never feature as a constituent of reasoning. At most, he claims bodily action can be causally related to reasoning. Some of the intuitive pull of causalism stems from the natural thought that there is a sense in which our reasoning is private. Our reasoning is not witnessable by others, the thought is. How is the thought witnessable? No one has ever seen their own thoughts. I've not even witnessed my own thoughts. Like, I have thoughts. I don't, like, how do you, like, I don't know. Like, that, in what sense is a thought witnessable? I mean, I can write something down. Sense is witnessable. Okay, this certainly seems to be true of what is naturally seen as paradigmatic reasoning, such as that carried out by Le Penseur whilst sat motionless on his rock. So it's the guy. Causalism accommodates that reasoning is private in the relevant sense, conceiving it as a mental process which is at most causally related to one's bodily actions. Okay, so they is never witnessable. Okay, so maybe you've got like mental stuff they're gonna go into. On the leading alternative to causalism, which I will label Aristotelianism in light of its alleged source, practical reasoning can constitutively involve bodily action. This is understood as a matter of non-mental events featuring as constituents of such reasoning. As Weiland puts it, on this view, practical reasoning is a process which can have bodily actions as constituents rather than mental events such as judgments, inferences, and acts of supposition. Practical reasoning in this way only a partially mental process. Whereas Tenenbaum puts it, the Aristotelian does not merely present a contrast between what is represented in the conclusion of theoretical and practical reasoning, but states that the latter is not a matter of representing, but of doing something. As indicated by this remark of Tenenbaum's, the Aristotelian's claim is usually restricted to the conclusion of practical reasoning. Practical reasoning can constitutively involve bodily action, that is, because bodily action can constitute concluding practical reasoning. The non-mental bodily event, which is one's taking a piece of cake, for instance, might constitute one's concluding practical reasoning about whether to have cake or a healthier alternative. Alright, I liked you when you were talking about taking cake. I disliked you when you talked about healthier alternatives. Cake may be the healthiest thing and smartest thing you ever do in your life. So I like this and I dislike that. I mean, I'm sorry about that, but you're wrong in that instance. My apologies for my like of cake. Aristotelian is typically motivated by its aptness to accommodate the supposed directness of the relation between practical reasoning and the action it issues in. Okay. When practical reasoning issues in action, the thought is, the reasoning yields action directly. This is seen as requiring one's concluding one's reasoning as one does and one's acting as one does are not two independent matters. So, me moving my hand is the end of the reasoning. It's not that I finished reasoning and therefore move my hand. It's that that was the last part of the reasoning. Okay, that is in turn seen as needed to capture the practicality of practical reasoning. The thought is that if all of our reasoning could do is lead causally to the action, then there would be nothing properly deserving the label practical reasoning. So yeah, okay, makes sense. It would just all be abstract stuff, and then the body takes the instructions abstractly. Furthermore, that some of our reasoning is properly deserving of that label is taken to be evident. The Aristotelian captures the practicality of practical reasoning, thus understood by having it that when practical reasoning issues an action, one's acting as one does, and one's concluding one's reasoning as one does are one and the same event. The main parties to the current dispute over the relation between reasoning and bodily action are thus those who maintain that bodily actions can at most be causally involved in reasoning on the one hand, and those who maintain that non-mental bodily actions can constitute the concluding of practical reasoning on the other. Dancy doubts that the question of whether actions can be the conclusion of practical reasoning is in good order. However, the question is objectionable so long as it is assigned a precise meaning. The question is simply whether forming a bodily action can constitute completing practical reasoning. To give an affirmative answer, as the Aristotelian does, is to claim that the performance of the bodily action can constitute the completion of a process of practical reasoning. I'm surprised these are the only two options. Maybe there's like other options that are just not as popular. Yeah, I mean, it would seem like there would be the obvious third one, which just denies the mental. Which I'm sure is why it's unpopular, but you can just deny the mental, it's all physical, and therefore it's not that you can sit there very quietly, but then you're saying there's no mind, it's a no mind answer. So you're sitting there very quietly, that is what thinking is, but that's the physical action, is the sitting there very quietly. So I'm sure that someone said something like that. It's just, I guess it's not popular enough to be talking about right here. Dancy instead recommends that we ask the following. Can an action stand to practical reasoning in the same relation that a belief can stand to theoretical reasoning? Okay. I mean, I understand the question. I'm just poisoned from too much busted intuitions in philosophy. The Aristotelian does have it that there is a respect in which bodily action can be related to practical reasoning as belief can be related to theoretical reasoning. There is thus a reading of Dancy's preferred question on which Aristotelianism amounts to a positive answer. Yeah, I mean, so action to practical reason, this is the action is some sort of result of the practical reason, just like belief can be to theoretical reason. So it can be some sort of result that is part of it, I guess, or constituent of it. Okay, judging coming to belief can constitute completing theoretical reasoning and potentially successfully so that one is achieving the aim of one's reasoning in judging coming to belief as one does. Similarly, for the Aristotelian, performing a bodily action can constitute completing practical reasoning and potentially successfully so that one is achieving the aim of reasoning in so acting. In such a case, one's bodily action is not merely an effect of one's reasoning, nor is it something which merely causes one's reasoning to stop, as a distraction or death might. For the Aristotelian, performing a bodily action can rather itself constitute completing practical reasoning, just as judging coming to belief can constitute completing theoretical reasoning. In this way, the relation between reasoning and bodily action, when the former issues in the latter, is parallel to that between reasoning and belief, when the former issues in the latter. Dancy, however, unpacks the question that he recommends we ask as follows. Can an action stand to the considerations rehearsed in the deliberation that leads to it, and to which it is a response in the same direction as that which a belief can stand to the considerations rehearsed in the reasoning that leads to it, and to which it is a response? He observes that just as considerations rehearsed in theoretical reasoning can favor believing some conclusion, considerations rehearsed in practical reason can favor performing a bodily action of some sort. Unpacking his preferred question this way, Dancy concerns himself with a distinct matter to that which it is at issue here. Dancy's concern is not the relation between reasoning and bodily action. It is instead the relation between actions and considerations rehearsed in practical reasoning, where the latter are certain facts or states of affairs. We should surely agree with Dancy that facts or states of affairs can favor performing actions just as they can favor believing. But this leaves unsettled the matter of the metaphysical relation between reasoning and bodily action. It is the latter which is the present concern, and a matter on which the Aristotelian takes a stand. In particular, the Aristotelian has it that the relation between reasoning and body can be constitutive, not merely causal. And the Aristotelian maintains this is a matter bodily action conceived of. This maintains that, and the Aristotelian maintains that this is a matter bodily. This matter is a bodily action conceived of as non-mental events constituting the concluding of practical reasoning. Yeah, I just don't like it might make sense, I just can't figure it out right now, but it made enough sense that I could get past it. Yeah, so we're defending the Aristotelian point of view right here. Or we're trying to get clear on the Aristotelian point right here. So I guess the author is, I guess the causal view must be the dominant position here, and the author's trying to get a little bit narrowing down the Aristotelian view here. Okay. With the disagreement of the causalist and Aristotelian clear, it should likewise be clear that the dispute is not merely terminological. For the Aristotelian, when one completes practical reasoning of one's by performing some bodily action, there need be no prior judgment, decision, event, or intention formation, or even event of belief formation, which is apt to be conceived of as one's concluding one's reasoning. For the causalist, meanwhile, when practical reasoning issues in bodily action, there must be some prior event which is apt to be conceived of as constituting one's concluding one's reasoning as a cause of one's bodily action. The dispute in question would only be terminological if both parties to it accepted the latter and were simply disagreeing about when to stop calling what is unfolding reasoning. Yeah, I guess, I mean, you could, like, maybe the causalist could, expand what they say. It's like, well, if they include just sort of like the derivative actions as part of the reasoning, but I guess they wouldn't want to. I mean, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure, like, the question here I'm having is, and this is nothing on the author, or I think the author is right in what they're saying, is just like, who's gonna be more unhappy with just saying, well, it's just a terminological dispute? I think the causalist would be, because they're saying, look, the mental stuff is in the mind, and the Aristotelian is saying no. And so, yeah, I think that's really what's coming here. Okay. I'm just trying to get clear on it. I'm not criticizing the author right in here. Yeah. Where does reasoning end? Because you'd have to accept the latter. Yeah. Okay. With the dispute of concern clear, I will proceed as follows. First, I will bring about how reflection on cases of reasoning out loud suggests an alternative to both causalism and Aristotelianism. On the proposed alternative, bodily actions can themselves amount to constituents of both practical and theoretical reasoning. Furthermore, such bodily actions themselves amount to contentful mental events. I will then turn to how the natural lines of resistance to this suggested trade-on type token errors on the questionable common factor assumption. With this done, it can be seen how causalism and Aristotelianism share a problematic structure. Both amount to contemporary commitments to what Rao called the mythical bifurcation of what we do into unwitnessable mental causes and their witnessable physical events. Okay. Okay, so this person is a third-way person. Alright. Following Ryle, reflection on cases of thinking out loud, like me, I'm talking out loud and attempting to think out loud and all these weird things right now, suggests a neglected alternative to both causalism and Aristotelianism. Suppose, for instance, that one is reasoning about whether P and thus is reasoning in order to determine whether P. So I'm currently trying to figure out what this author is saying, and I'm trying to reason and try to work it out while talking and reading at the same time. Yes, I understand this problem very clearly. This is something which one might do without moving one's body at all. One might reason as Rodin La Penseur, for instance, while it sat motionless on a rock. But it is also something which one might do out loud, either wholly or in part. When one does so, it is in turn natural to understand one as reasoning by saying what one does. What one might begin by supposing that P, for instance, and then infer Q from P. And one might do so by first saying P out loud and then by saying Q out loud. Well, is that what you mean by refer in that case, or something else? I'm not sure, because then you've got, infer, not refer. Excuse me, that's a bad mistake. Very different things. In this way, one can perform judgments, inferences, and acts of suppositions by saying things out loud and engaging in reasoning in doing so. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't like this example yet. I think it is like 95% of the way there, but in some sense there's feedback, I'd like to say, and the author might get to this. It's like 95% of the times when I say something, the author gets there eventually, and usually like in the next like sentence, and I'm just like, well, the author had thought of everything. I thought of there's feedback going on when you're talking to yourself. And so I think that would be an important factor to say. It's not that you're saying it out loud, it's that you're saying it to yourself. Because just like yelling out loud, but say you don't actually hear what you're saying, that wouldn't that wouldn't be very helpful, just sort of making guttural sounds and not hearing it. So like if you had like the music was playing very loud, then like screaming it, then saying it out loud doesn't help you. You need to actually hear what you're saying, and then you're getting the feedback, and then that is actually the feedback is doing a bunch of work right there. It's one of the reasons I have the headphones on, is I have a little bit of music going. I don't think you can hear it on the stream, but it does block out the background stuff so that basically it's only my voice I can hear at the moment. And like every so often, like a song will switch and I'll get too loud, I have to turn it down because it blocks this exact sort of thing going on. Also, speaking of this, the mic I'm using also, it has auditory feedback so that I can tell when I'm too far away from the mic, and that also helps me understand the feedback of how the performance is going, and that also matters how I'm thinking about things. So those are slight asides, but I think they might help this example. An alternative is to maintain that when one engages in such reasoning out loud, one does not really judge and first suppose by saying things out loud. So the author knows exactly what they're doing. Instead, it could be maintained that such out loud utterances are merely the verbal expressions of prior judgments. This is slightly different. Prior judgments, inferences, acts of supposition. When one supposes that P above, for example, one first supposes P and then says P out loud as a result, such that the latter amounts to the expression of the former and might in turn affect the course of one's reasoning. But this suggestion is problematic when it comes to accounting for the purposiveness of development out loud utterances. Consider again when one says P out loud above. Can we ask what the reason with which one says P is? For what reason does one say P? It seems clear that one's reasoning for saying P need not be to express a prior act. One need not say P in order to express one's prior act of supposing that P. Nor need one's reason to be aid one's future reasoning or to reveal how one's reasoning is unfolding to others. When one says P, it may be that one's sole reason for doing so is to engage in reasoning about whether P. One's purpose may simply be to figure out whether P. It need not be that when one reasons out loud rather than motionlessly, one must thereby have some further purpose with which one expresses how one's reasoning unfolds. Okay, so this seems to be a more like a guttural sort of like you're just saying it, and that helps you like you were saying bah or something like that. Or you're screaming in pain. It's like you're just saying it to get the pain out. And there is good evidence that, like, say you curse when you say pain, and cursing actually helps you withstand more pain. It lessens the pain. And so in that sense, it's like just the act of saying it does do things, and there is evidence for that sort of thing. So, okay, fine. It could be maintained, and that's different from what I said about the feedback. Or maybe it's related, but it's not what I was saying earlier. It could be maintained in light of the above that when one reasons out loud, one's out loud utterances are mere expressions of one's prior acts, and that this does not entail that one must say what one does out loud for some reason other than to engage in reasoning. An alternative possibility is that one says what one does for no reason at all. Well, that would be weird. When one says P out loud above, on this view, it may be that this is something which one does for no reason. Sure, but what would seem very odd. It does seem to be the case that we perform actions for no reason, after all. One might doodle for no reason during a talk, for instance, or kick a door which refuses to shut for no reason. Like, really? You doodle because you're bored, you doodle to entertain yourself, and you kick a door because you're frustrated. I mean, maybe it's fun, I don't know. But I mean, I guess you could also do these things for no reason, but it would seem very odd that when reasoning you do things for no reason. Okay. However, it seems equally clear that when one reasons out loud, it need not be the case that one says what one does for no reason at all, if not for some reason or reason other than to engage in reasoning itself. When we reason out loud, we do not conceive our out loud utterances as such that they must serve no purpose at all if they are not performed for some other reason other than to engage in reasoning itself. In saying P above, for instance, one can do so simply in order to engage in reasoning about whether P. One need not do so for some other further reason or for no reason whatsoever. Sure. The result is above is that someone who denies that we can reason by saying out loud will face a dilemma when it comes to purposiveness of the relevant out loud utterance. I don't like that word for some reason. That's very funny. They must either say that the relevant utterance are performed for reasons other than to engage in reasoning, or that they are performed for no reason at all. Okay, yeah, they're can make the case that there are some factor in engaging in reasoning. Okay. Accordingly, they will either commit to an over-intellectualized account of out-loud reasoning in maintaining that when one reasons out loud, one must make the relevant out-loud utterance for some reason other than to simply engage in reasoning, or they will fail to capture the purposiveness of the utterances involved in such reasoning, and having it that they are performed for no reason whatsoever. When one says P, then Q, whilst reasoning above, for instance, one can reason for doing so can simply be to engage in reasoning about whether P. One can thus judge and first suppose by making such out loud utterances, engaging in reasonings in doing so. Furthermore, it follows from that one can judge and first suppose by saying things out loud and reasoning in doing so, such that out loud utterances can amount to constituents of reasoning. When one reasons out loud, one's out loud utterances can themselves feature as constituents of the continuously unfolding process which is one's reasoning. One saying of P, for instance, can itself amount to the act by which one judges and first supposes that P, such that when one does so, one's saying of P is to be identified with one's judgment inferences act of supposition. In this way, reasoning can constitutively involve bodily action. We can literally reason out loud. Okay. I just want to comment. This author keeps using the one's locution. I mean, just switch it up to they or something if you don't want to get gendered on this. It's just it gets so repetitive just in reading that there's other ways to say it, especially you don't need to just go to a he or she. There's plenty of other things to do. I mean, it's good for consistency stuff, but it gets repetitive in terms of reading. So, okay. Compare a case in which someone signals conspiratorially to an accomplice by winking. On the natural way of understanding such a case, the person does not perform two distinct actions, winking and signaling, such that we might ask about whether and in what way the winking and signaling are causally related. Given that the person in question signals by winking, the winking in question just is the signaling. The winking, that is identical to the signaling. Or consider a statesman who signs a peace treaty by scribbling on a piece of paper. Again, on the natural way of understanding the case, the person does not perform two distinct actions, scribbling and signing, such that we might ask of their causal relation. The person scribbling just is their signing, and in turn might just be their bringing war to close. They're bringing war to a close. War to close. It's either way, it's fine. The natural event individuation principle in the background here is that if one sighs by sighing, then the event which one is sighing is identical to the event which is one's sighing. Yeah, so it's a performative of some sort. The same event individuation principle tells us that since one might judge and first suppose that P by saying P whilst reading out loud, such bodily actions can just be judgments, inferences, acts of supposition, and thereby feature as constituents of reasoning. The suggestion here does not need restricting to the concluding of practical reasoning. When one reasons out loud, the bodily actions which are one's utterances can just be acts by which one carries out one's reasoning, where the reasoning in question may be practical or theoretical. Once accepted, this picture of the relation between reasoning and bodily action can also be extended well beyond the case of reasoning out loud. One might reason about what route to take by drawing on a map, for instance, or solve a puzzle about the motion of cogs by rotating one's hands. Given the above natural event individuation principle, when one does so, one's bodily actions amount to constituents of one's reasoning and to actions by which one carries out the reasoning in question. In line with Aristotelians, this picture can also be extended to vindicate the suggestion that acting as one decides to can constitute concluding practical reasoning. One might conclude practical reasoning about whether to have a cake or a healthier alternative by reaching for cake, for instance, and one's reaching thereby constituting one's concluding one's reasoning. That said, there is no need to follow Aristotelian the Aristotelian having that reasoning is a process with non-mental constituents. On the view suggested, reasoning can constitutively involve bodily actions, which are themselves contentful, meaningful events. One saying P of P out loud can be identical to the contentful mental event, which is one's judgment that P, for instance, and one's reaching for cake can be identical to the contentful mental event, which is one's decision to have cake. In this way, following Ryle, our bodily actions can themselves amount to the workings of our minds. Okie dokie. So it's just it's extending the mind out into the body, and sort of, this is not too far away from like how, you know, some phenomenologies go. So it's just I guess the twist here is that it's coming in from the reasoning standpoint, which is cool. That's good. Objections to Ryleanism. Is it Ryleanism? I don't know, because it's Gilbert Ryle, right? Not Ryleanism. I don't know. My apologies to everybody for how I say their names. Reflection on cases of reasoning out loud suggests that we can perform judgments, inferences, and acts of supposition by saying things out loud and engage in reasoning in doing so. Given the above natural event individuation principle, it follows that such out loud utterances can amount to constituents of reasoning. One's saying P out loud, for instance, can be token identical to a judgment, inference, act of supposition and to a constituent of an unfolding process of reasoning. In general, bodily actions can feature as mental constituents of reasoning. Some have taken the same conclusion to be suggested by recent work in embodied cognition. Yeah, this is what I was saying about the phenomenology, sort of embodied cognition stuff. Proponents of the latter line of thought appeal to the extent to which bodily action can be functionally similar to paradigmatic non-bodily constituents of reasoning, and to the extent to which bodily actions can be functionally integrated with reasoning in support of the conclusion that bodily actions can feature as mental constituents of reason. I am not taking a stand on these arguments here. Instead, I've offered a further argument for the same conclusion. The view that the likes of bodily actions can themselves amount to mental constituents of reasoning falls out of the natural way to understand our out-loud reasoning. Furthermore, as I will draw out presently, the natural lines of resistance to this suggestion trade on type token errors or on a questionable common factor assumption. Yeah, so again, if anyone out there has questions for me in Twitch land at the moment, you can also, I guess, YouTube people could write in the comments if they wanted. But it's like they're coming at this stuff, which has been mentioned, but in a different context. The embodied cognition people, the phenomenologists, some of them at least. But this is from the reasoning side, so that's new. Which is, like I said, it's nice. Okay. A natural causalist line of resistance in line with causalism's motivation would trade on the observation that we can reason without performing bodily actions. When one judges out that P out loud and reasons in doing so, for instance, one could equally have judged that P without saying anything out loud. The causalist may conclude that an out loud utterance thus cannot itself be a judgment that P. At most, our out loud utterance can express prior judgments. In general, the thought is, for any constituent reasoning of mental kind, that's a phi, for instance, judgment, inference, supposition, decision, and bodily action of bodily kind psi, one can phi without sighing. The causalist conclusion is that no bodily action can ever itself be identical to a mental event. As so noted in section 1, however, reasoning is a kind of aim-directed thinking. Yeah, so if you take it away from the event, but making it aim-directed, then you can separate this out. Reasoning is thereby a kind of mental process. Accordingly, any given constituent event of a process of reasoning must be itself a mental event. Bodily action cannot thus feature as a constituent of reasoning. Only mental events can, according to the line of thinking in question, and bodily actions can never themselves be mental events. A natural Aristotelian line of resistance runs parallel to above. According to the Aristotelian, we need to accommodate that bodily actions can constitute concluding practical reason. One's reasoning for cake, for instance, might constitute one's concluding reasoning about whether to have cake. Why is there a question about how to have cake? Have the cake. However, one could reach for cake without deciding to have cake. One could instead be moving the cake away so that it is no longer tempting to be pretending to want cake to be polite. When one does conclude by reaching for cake, the objection goes, one must thereby be concluding reasoning about whether to have cake without deciding to do so. In general, the thought is, for any bodily action of kind phi and any mental constituent of reasoning of mental kind sign, one can phi without sighing. Again, this may be taken to reveal that no bodily action can ever be itself identical to a mental constituent of reason. With this accepted, the Aristotelian must accommodate their claim that bodily actions can constitute concluding practical reasoning by denying the apparent platitude that all constituent events of reasoning are themselves mental events, and thus by denying that reasoning is a wholly mental process. As noted in section 1, the point in question is conceded by Weiland, who rests content with the capturing that reasoning is partially mental process. As the Aristotelian sees it, we must accept that when reasoning issues in bodily action, it is only partially mental process in order to capture the bodily actions, that bodily actions can constitute concluding practical reasoning. Okay, so... Alright, so what does the author have to say about this? On reflection, the above objections can be seen to trade on type token errors. The causalist objection trades on an inference that from that we can reason without performing bodily actions to the conclusion that bodily actions can never be constituents of reasoning. Yeah, I mean, just because you don't use the body doesn't mean it can't be part of it. But that we can reason without doing so by performing bodily actions does not entail that bodily actions can never also amount to mental events, which are constituents of reasoning. The Aristotelian objection, meanwhile, trades on an inference that we can perform bodily actions without making corresponding decisions to the conclusion that bodily actions can never themselves amount to decisions, and thus to mental constituents of reasoning. But that we can perform bodily actions without making corresponding decisions does not entail that bodily actions can never also amount to decisions, and thus to mental constituents of reasoning. In general, that fying can occur without sighing does not entail that one's fying can never be identified with sighing. Of course, for instance, one can judge that P without saying P out loud. The type judgment that P cannot be identified with the type of saying of P out loud. But that does not mean that a token judgment of that P cannot be identified with a token saying out loud of P. Similarly, one can reach for cake without deciding to have cake. The type of reaching for cake cannot be identified with the type deciding to have cake, but that does not mean that a token reaching cannot be identical to a token deciding. Compare how one might wink without signaling to anyone. That does not mean that a token wink cannot be identical to a token act of signaling. What this makes clear is that the above lines of resistance are the Riley's suggestion that bodily actions can amount to mental constituents of reasoning trade on type token errors. The causalist line does so in taking it that the fact that we can reason without performing bodily actions reveal that no token bodily action can be identical to a constituent of reasoning. The Aristotelian line does so taking it that the fact that we can perform bodily actions without making corresponding decisions reveal that no token bodily action can be identical to a decision. This in turn reveals that the Aristotelian denial of the apparent platitude that reasoning is a mental process is unmotivated. Capturing the Aristotelian suggestion that bodily actions can constitute concluding practical reasoning does not require denying that the relevant concluding acts are themselves mental constituents of reason. Okay, so this is basically saying the other views generalized a little too quickly. Just because you don't always have to move while thinking doesn't mean the moving can't be part of thinking. And then from the other side, just because you move without you can think without moving, then you can also move without thinking. But that doesn't, of course, mean that you can also move and think. So I can talk and read at the same time in some sense, and so it's like you can do both at the same time. Can't talk and drink water at the same time though. That's difficult. So anything really to be said here? Not really. I see why the author argued this way. I think it might have been there's other ways to argue this. Don't know if I have anything better to suggest about this paragraph, but you do see, at least it does seem clear that in breaking things up in both the Aristotelian and the causalist way, you still are getting this distinction, but you can do both. Apparently, the author is saying there's no hard distinction here between the event and like the bodily action, or the event and the mental event, the bodily event and the mental event. Okay. As noted, section 2, the positive case for the proposed Riley's view traded on a natural event individuation principle, according to which if one sighs by fying, then the event is one is one's fying is identical to the event in one's sighing. Some reject this principle and embrace an alternative one. If fying can occur without sighing, then a token fying can never be identical to a token sighing. Kim, for instance, insists that Brutus' stabbing of Caesar cannot be identified with Brutus' killing of Caesar because Brutus could have stabbed Caesar without killing him. The morning star's emitting of yellow light, meanwhile, can be identified with its emitting of light the color of a sunflower, since it could not do the former without doing the latter. Those who embrace this alternative will likewise reject the Violian move from the natural thought that we can reason by saying things out loud to the conclusion that reasoning can constitutively involve bodily action. In doing so, however, they can be seen as trading on a type token error of the kind warned against. As Davidson puts it, for instance, Kim's claim that Brutus stabbing Caesar cannot be identified with Brutus' killing of Caesar gains its plausibility from the fact that not all stabbings are killings, but that Brutus could have stabbed Caesar without killing him does not entail the token stabbing of Caesar by Brutus was not also the killing of Caesar. In general, the rejection of the natural principle that if one sighs by fying, then the event is one's fying is identical to the event which is one's sighing gains its plausibility from the observation that for many phies and sighs one can phi without sighing. But that one can phi without sighing does not entail that a token phi cannot be identified with the token sighing. It only tells us that the type phi cannot be identified with the type psi. Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is sort of just the general case. Just because one thing could be seen in a few different ways, that doesn't mean any particular instance could be seen in different ways. So, yet another line of objection to the Violian proposal might come from the form of a kind of common factor objection. Compare a case in which one judges that P out loud, however that is to be understood, to a case in which one says P out loud where this is mere noise making. In the latter case, one may seem to be judging that P from a third-person perspective, but one is doing no such thing. We can ask what account for the difference between these two cases. The best account, it might be claimed, as follows. In both cases, there is an event which is the saying of P out loud, but only in the former cases this event caused by a prior judgment that P. The thought is that the difference between the cases is best accounted for by saying that it is only in the former case that one's out loud utterance of P is a prior product of a prior judgment that P. So like you get like poked and you say some word, but you didn't even know what word it was. It was just sort of a exclamation. But then compare that to when you actually said the word before, when you did mean whatever it normally meant. Okay. A parallel case has been offered in favor of a causal theory of seeing. We can compare a case in which one sees that P to one in which one merely seems to see that P. When it comes to accounting for the difference, it might be thought that the best way to go is to have it that in both cases there is an experience which is a seeming to see of that P. The difference can then be seen as a matter of whether this experience is appropriately caused by appropriate elements of one's external environment. Okay, so there's like appropriateness. Okay. In response to the above argument for a causal theory of seeing, it can be pointed out that in both of the cases in question involving one's having experience of the kind seeming to see, does not entail that this is not so in virtue of one's having token experience of distinct, more fundamental kinds of the two cases. Okay, so you can, just because you seem to see it doesn't mean you didn't see it. A disjunctivist alternative is to have it that seeming to see that P is either a matter in fact seeing that P or merely seeming to see that P, where the latter are experiences of fundamentally different kinds, the former and not the latter constitutively involving the worldly objects of perception. This makes way for a different account of the differences between the two cases, rather than seeing the difference between seeing that P and merely seeming to see that P is a matter of the external cause of one's experience. We can have it that such experiences are distinguished by their having distinct fundamental natures. Okay, so they're just declaring it. Look, you can, just because you seem to see something doesn't mean it's not actually out there. An analogous response can be made to the above common factor objection to the proposed Violian view. That both of the relevant cases involve events of saying P out loud does not entail that this is not so in virtue of the occurrence of token events of distinct, more fundamental kinds, such that the cases must be distinguished in terms of whether the event have appropriate mental causes. A disjunctivist alternative is to say that one's saying that P in the two cases is either a matter of one's judging out loud the P or a matter of merely saying P out loud where this is mere noise making, the latter being events of fundamentally different kinds. Again, this makes way for a different account of the difference between the cases. Rather than seeing the difference between judging the P out loud. Yeah, I know, it's a little dry. I'm sorry, Crimson Queso. But what are you going to do? Sometimes you get dry philosophy. And merely saying P out loud is a matter of whether one's utterance has an appropriate prior mental cause. We can have it that such events are distinguished by their being events with different fundamental natures, the former and not the latter as being a kind of mental event as well as a kind of bodily action. You know, one of the points in reading these papers is just like to encourage people to write better. If you actually hear someone reading it out loud, sometimes you realize that certain things just sound bad, and hopefully you'll work on it to make it so it sounds less bad. But yeah. But ask ask questions if you want. I mean, I try not to beat up on these authors in the philosophy area. They're not out to write the best written papers in the world. They're just not. They're trying to make some other point. And so although I do it is, no, all the stuff I read is for an academic audience, but you have to understand, they want people to read their stuff. And so they should try to actually make it legible or like readable to everybody else, but it doesn't happen because it's hard enough to write a good philosophy paper anyway. But yeah, I do, part of the rhetoric of writing is, like, I do like to comment on that too. So this is a little dry. Sometimes actually, maybe I'll get back to it. I read papers from philosophy and literature, and those, at least, even if the author isn't a good writer, they quote people who are excellent writers. And then at least you have really nice little bits of poetry or literature, and that makes for great reading. Okay. Let me finish up this paragraph. I mean, the paper's almost done. I'm on 11 of 14. The need to respond to the above common factor objection in this way brings out how the proposed Ryland view amounts to a form of disjunctivism. On the proposed Ryland view, a token saying out loud of P can potentially amount to mere noise-making or to out loud judging, inferring, supposing, or the latter are more fundamental kinds than saying out loud. This mirrors how the disjunctivist about seeing has it that seeing that P and merely seeming to see that P are more fundamental kinds than seeming to see that P. Taking this line allows us to capture natural thoughts that we can literally judge out loud and allow us to avoid the problematic commitments of seeing judging out loud as a matter of expressing inner judgment. Okay. With the above Rylean picture, the above relation between reasoning and bodily action on the table, it can be seen that what is wrong with its alternatives from the Rylean perspective. Ryle complained of his contemporaries that they are committed themselves to what he saw as a mythical bifurcation of what we do into unwitnessable mental causes and their witnessable physical events. We find contemporary commitment to such a bifurcation in both causalism and Aristotelianism. Both leave us with a picture on which what we do when we reason is divided into the mental and unwitnessable on the one hand and the witnessable bodily effects thereof on the other. As seen in section 1, the thought that reasoning is itself unwitnessable gains plausibility from its being natural to see reasoning as such as carried out by Le Penseur, motionless on his rock, as paradigmatic. Reflection on the likes of reasoning out loud, however, suggests the above Rylean picture of reasoning's relation to bodily action. And given that picture, the bifurcation in question is indeed mythical. We need not divide up what one does when one reasons into the mental and unwitnessable on the one hand and the bodily and the observable on the other, any more than we should divide what one does when one runs in such a way. One can see reasoning itself unfold as one watches someone reasoning out loud, just as one can see running itself unfold as one watches someone run. To see how they commit to the bifurcation in question, consider causalism and Aristotelianism in turn. According to the causalist, reasoning is a mental process in which is at most causally related to bodily actions. Causalism is thus a view on which reasoning is never itself observable as such. Granted, it seems clear that we often can observe that someone is reasoning. One might see that someone is reasoning by seeing them staring motionless at a puzzle written on a blackboard, for instance. But on the causalist view, when one reasons, the process which is one's reasoning itself and the constituent events cannot be observable as such. Yeah, there's a point here about even sitting very quietly and looking at something. So how do you even define what counts as a motionless event? I mean, staring at a puzzle seems motionless, like the thinker, but there still might be some intentional act there that you could call an event. Okay. As Soterio notes, this claim need not be in tension with the claim that the relevant processes and events are to be identified with, in principle, the observable physical, perhaps neural processes and events. Even supposing such an identification holds, to perceive the relevant physical processes or events would not be to perceive them as reasoning or as constituents thereof. To bring this out, we can compare reasoning to an agential process which does seem to be observable as such. Suppose that one sees someone running, for instance. One might see the running itself unfold, having direct perceptual knowledge of the process in question as running, such that one has direct perceptual knowledge that running is occurring and might then inquire into the intention with which it is being performed. Yes, if you see a bunch of people running at you, you might want to start running in the same direction they are too. That would be some very good reasoning. Suppose, on the other hand, that one has the means to observe some neural process which is to be identified with someone's reasoning, like from an fMRI. It seems clear that one will nonetheless not have direct perceptual knowledge of the process as reasoning, such that one has direct perceptual knowledge that reasoning is occurring and might then inquire into the intention with which it is being performed. Causalists thus commit to the bifurcation which Ryle warns against in dividing up what one does when one reasons into the unobservable as such mental processes, which is one's reasoning, and the observable as such bodily actions, which might themselves be the products or of effect the course of one's reasoning. From the Rylean perspective, the causalist is led astray here by the fact that when we describe a process as reasoning, we thereby operate at a level of description on which we abstract away from the constituents' potentially bodily nature. According to the Aristotelians, practical reasoning can constitutively involve bodily actions. Aristotelians also commit to the bifurcation warned against by Ryle. They do so in dividing up reasoning itself into observable as such mental acts on the one hand, for instance, judgments, inferences, and acts of supposition, and observable, those are the unobservables, and observables such as bodily actions conceived of as non-mental events on the other. An alternative is to maintain with Ryle that reasoning is a mental process which can feature constituents which qualify as both mental and bodily actions. From the Rylean perspective, the Aristotelian misses the possibility of this view, being led astray by the fact that when we describe as a given event as a bodily action, we thereby operate at a level of description on which we abstract away from its potential mental nature. Okie dokie. This was a little bit of fun, but as noted by the viewers, a tad repetitive. But it was a good article otherwise, and this is not to beat up on philosophers for their this is not a writing class. So, what to say in terms of philosophy? Yeah, there is something to be said about what I was just saying. When, in that last comment, when someone is staring intently at a puzzle, what are they doing? They're not moving, you say they're thinking. But isn't the staring intently, hey Isabella, isn't staring intently some sort of action too? I mean, it's not like if you stop moving, like you're still holding your body in a certain position. You're holding yourself in that way. Like the thinker, like they kept saying, like the prototypical philosophy dude like this, that's not comfortable to sit like that. Like you can't do that for that long. Like that's an action. You have to work on that. You have to, like when you're doing a puzzle and you're thinking about something, it's like you sit there like this. Like that's an action in itself. Granted, you're not doing a whole lot of different actions, but you're still holding yourself in a certain position. Like if you don't do anything, you fall over. Like you have to like consciously have effort to keep yourself there. So in some sense, I find I mean, I agree with the author in some sense. I'm finding the examples that the causalists and the Aristotelians are using very suspect, especially with regards to how we're understanding the identification of actions here and the objects. Yeah, let me know if the audience has any questions. I will try to answer them. What was the other thing I wanted to say? There's the feedback principle. I think there's more work to be done. This is just my opinion on how, in some sense, we get bodily feedback for thinking. So it's not only part of the thinking; it is actually an active, like sort of like a logical feature. It's like you get more information back by doing stuff than you put out there, and it's like one of those. I mean, it's from the phenomenology. But by touching the glass, you understand more about the glass, and so just as when I was saying, like, I'm trying to think out loud, you get feedback hearing your own words in some sense. And again, also when reading like this out loud, it's not the same thing as reading quietly. There are different actions. So, that's fine. You don't have to understand everything. I don't understand everything anyway. Okay, well, this is I read academic philosophy, so I don't expect anyone to actually understand anything. But yeah, this is a somewhat writing stream, and this for you maybe is case in point of how not to write. Um, it depends what you're trying to do, really. This person is arguing for a little bit of a difficult. This is a difficult topic, and so we shouldn't beat up on them for the repetitive nature, because this is basically how. This is how you get published. This is how you get your writing out there. Yeah, and so I don't mean to be beating up on them for the repetitive nature. This is how philosophy gets done. So, like I said, this is not an English class, but this is a philosophy paper review. And it does matter if no one else besides philosophers can read it, but not that much. Yeah. So, do I have any other comments there? Oh yeah, the feedback phenomenology, the identification of actions I find funky. Again, these are not problems with this paper. It's just the sort of the state of the argumentation at the moment. Let's see, anything else? No, that's about it for now. Yeah, I'm a little over an hour. I usually try to keep it at about an hour. So unless you guys have anything else to ask, I think I will call it for tonight. And what day is today? Saturday. I'll be back tomorrow morning. So I'll be back tomorrow morning and tomorrow for more papers. Have a good night, all, and yeah, that's it. Be safe out there.